kind of a funny story. Actually, originally, it started with an argument. And that argument was, how many cows do we have? And so we were sitting here at the ranch, and it was me and the ranch manager. I think Carrie was here, and between the three of us, or the four of us, everybody was arguing about how many animals we had. And it became kind of heated. And then I finally just said, look, we can figure this out. We just got to bring them in and we got to count them up. And then as we started talking about what that looked like, how we were going to count them, were we going to retag them, were we going to do this, and how were we going to manage them after that, so that we didn't have to have this conversation again. And that's when kind of the light bulb went on, which was, I spent a lot of my career doing this with all sorts of different businesses, is helping them figure out how to manage their data. And we kind of realized that this was an opportunity to do that for our own business. And so it really started with the animals and figuring out, how we were going to track all that. And the other aspect of it was not just how many that we had, but we knew if we were going to be a grass-fed provider, which is what we were at the time, that we had to track all this information. We had to not just know how many we had, but we had to know, had we given them vaccines, had we fed them things we're not supposed to, and so we had to track all this information. So that was kind of how it started. I think the launch of HarvestPath was an 8-year process, if you think about it. We started with animals and tracking them, but then as soon as we kind of got that under control, we were taking those animals and turning them into inventory. And so we quickly realized that, okay, now we got all the animal data figured out, and then we converted that to beef, and now we have meat inventory. And that actually started to spiral out of control and get beyond our ability to manage that in spreadsheets. And it actually got to be an even worse problem, because one cow turns into thousands of pieces of meat. And so the number started to grow really fast. And so over time, we built the animal piece, and then we built, harvest management. And every time we got one piece under control, we realized, oh, well, there we have another section of the supply chain that we, hadn't completed yet. And so we would just kind of move from one piece of the supply chain to the next. And then the more we operated the business with the platform, the more we found little things here and little things there, and we need to have this. And so it was really a process of just continually building and adding and augmenting and changing and over time as our business grew and our needs grew. And so it was a long process.
Also, early on, it wasn't so much a challenge. Well, I guess it was a challenge for a business, but one of our processors had a recall. And because we were tracing where all of our animals were going and where all the meat was going, it was when we were doing more box beef, like very simple cuts. We knew exactly where those animals went. And so we were able to get on the phone really quickly and call those customers personally and be like, hey, there was a recall at this processor. We can either reimburse you all your money for the meat, or you can throw it away, whatever you want to do. And so we were able to pivot pretty quickly.
My piece started with the Richards grass-fed beef side. I'm the graphic designer of the family, so that was the largest amount of skills I could bring to the beef company, and doing labels. And at a lot of times we were starting with flyers and little posters at events and giveaways and coupons. So it started out there, and then we've redone the website a couple times. So I did the original one, then Carrie did the second one, and then both of us have managed the third one. So we've worked on that. And then now that we're doing HarvestPath, the digital skills and the digital awareness and including the branding into all of it is kind of where my wheelhouse is. So it's just kind of carried along from the beginning.
How did my background help in the creation of of this business? You know, it really is, it's two things. It's two pieces really. It's my growing up in a ranching family is number one. And knowing that life, knowing the experience, knowing what it's like to work cattle, knowing what it's like, you know, all of these different all the complexities of doing these things. And the other piece that came together was the work that I had done for years in the software industry, and specifically working in the software as a service space. And what I had done for years is work with really big businesses, working with their business process, right? How do they manage their business process, their people, and their technology together to enable their business and scale and all these kinds of things? And so it was really the taking that experience and then applying it to the ag industry, which I think is fairly unique in the ag world, is, you know, people having technical skills and ag skills, and was bringing those two things together.
The relevance of my background is more on the technology and product side. So I got connected with Tom through a common connection from my days at Salesforce. And my background is really building software systems. So for the last 15 years, I've worked for a partner of Salesforce called Code Science, which is referred to as a PDO, which is a partner development organization. And in different roles as a product owner and solution architect and others. I was always designing and building products for our clients, and then our clients would go and sell them and support them themselves. And then after Code Science, I was looking for something a little more along the lines of something to actually own and, you know, be involved in one product. And so when I was connected with Tom and he was kind of, you know, breaking down what they were doing, this is really kind of a perfect client from, you know, my PDO days. It would be where someone comes to you with, you know, an interesting business idea. They know they generally want to use the Salesforce platform because of all the things that it offers. They also have a robust partner program and whatnot, and need somebody who knows what they're doing there. So, you know, that's kind of my bread and butter. So it's been really fun and exciting getting into, you know, an industry that I was always on the consumer end of, but knew really nothing about, you know, everything upstream. So it's been fun and cool to see how we can use Salesforce to solve these different problems for ranchers.
Yeah, and as far as the branding goes, they kind of were on the same trajectory for a while. We were kind of talking about it in the same way, and then at a certain point, we decided to break it out so that it had to be kind of significantly different, because we didn't want to be confused with being or not being a data company, because that's pretty much what HarvestPath is. It's tracking the data. So we decided that it needed to look a little different, feel a little different, and the path needed to be the focus. So that's where that came into line, is the path, is the focus. So it's not just the cattle, it's not just the processing, it's literally, or it's all of it. It's all of it through start to finish. So that's kind of where and then the branding follows.
My background. So I don't have any background in software. I was a photographer and a highly organized job. Once I started running the ranch, I realized how complex it is. And when we were co-building the beef company with HarvestPath, I realized that I have young kids. I have a busy life. There's a lot of other ranching kids out there that are taking over for their family. they need to be able to run their business efficiently. I joke from the soccer field because that's where I am. If I'm not at the ranch, I'm watching a soccer game in some town and outside of Sacramento. So my experience of, growing up, coming up to the ranch and being a part of the ranch is part of it. And then my experience in taking over operations from our dad and realizing that we need to have all this information in one place. We need to have it all in one place so we can all access it. We need to have it all in one place so we can stay efficient. We can do budgeting. We can work as a family, and we can run it from anywhere, like the soccer field.
I think the biggest thing that makes HarvestPath unique is it's a one system. The industry is full of all sorts of applications that do one piece and this piece and that piece and all separately. And I think we were maybe not the first, but one of the first to really look at the entire path, if you will, right? The entire supply chain. I call it the supply and the impact chain, right? Because there's the process of getting the animal, processing the animal, and delivering it as a product. But then there's also the path of what is the impact of the animal on the environment? What's the impact of the product on the people who eat it? And so there's nothing to my knowledge that really looked at this whole process, this whole path that an animal goes through, and including the costs and all the movement of product and all these different things. There was no singular system that did all of it in one place. And so that's what we were trying to do, is deliver something that's one login, not 14. Well, we're still very small and very scrappy. And so, right now we're launching our first customers and, getting people up and running and successful. And I think we've proven the model. I think that, or at least with the first customers, it seems like we're hitting the nail on the head in terms of what they need and what we're delivering. And now it's just a question of scale, right? How do we create the machine and scale sales and marketing and all these different things. So really, I think we're moving into that go-to-market scale stage. That's my perspective from a operational side. It was a joint effort. I'd say Jeremy and I went on kind of the road a little bit, right? And we knew what we did. We knew that we ran a cattle operation, we ran a beef company, and we knew how we did things. But we knew we're not the only ones doing it, right? We know, there's a lot of people raising cattle in this country. And so we kind of went on a road trip and visited a couple different people, and we got a couple different perspectives that were very, very valuable. And so it was, I think, it was a combination of our ideas and then also what we learned from a lot of people that we visited. But I know I won't steal Jeremy's thunder. He had kind of a great idea that I think really started to become something that we've really leaned into.
I think a lot of how the products were sort of delineated came originally from, Carrie and Tom's experience directly running, on one side the cattle ranch, and then on another side the beef production company. So to Tom's point, they've both been doing this for a long time, and so we really had a bunch of subject matter experts built into our team, which was terrific. And then being able to go out on that road trip and visit with some prospective customers was great, because then we got some other perspectives and validation on some of the things we were talking about. And so one of the ideas that came out of that was the idea of an animal ledger. Um, because one of the guys we were talking with, the most important thing for him to know was knowing everything he's got in an animal, meaning every dollar he's got invested in each of those animals, and understanding the revenue and the margin that they're going to get out of that same animal. Well, today they're using spreadsheets and dirty pieces of paper to track that. And so, the idea was, well, if we can get that down to a granular level where we're tracking every cost and every, all of your time that needs to go into raising and finishing those animals, then we can give you a better sense of what you're going to make on the back end. So um, that's where really kind of a lot of those ideas came from. And it's been great seeing Tom and Carrie using it so far, and having it be helpful.
Also, being in the meat industry for as long as we have, we figured out finally where all these transition points are, from animal to carcass, from carcass to processed beef, from processed beef to customer. And so we were able to build the software to cater to those transition points, because that's where you kind of have to snap the chalk line on the cost and then move forward from there. And when we first started out, that was a very muddy chalk line. But we were able to figure out like where we can kind of like divide the apps, and where each, like animal path, production path, and protein path, that's why they're in the segments that they're in.
So the process of developing the three core modules of HarvestPath were really based on the system that that Tom and company had built over the last 8 or 9 years for themselves, which is often what happened, again, kind of back in my PDO world. In my experience, was that people would have maybe an off-platform solution, but they wanted to have something built on Salesforce. So so that's the direction that we would be able to help them go in.
Animal path is for running your ranching operation, whether it's sheep, cattle, bison, tracing all of your animals, the offspring, the moms, the dads, all of the information that you want to trace with your animals. You can group them into herds, which is which was basically an angle I wanted to take, because that's how a lot of ranches manage their animals. They have the mama herd, they have the finishing herd, they have the bull herd. And so that's a way to group your animals and track that cost, like Jeremy had mentioned before, which is the animal ledger. Because you want to make sure you can see where your cost is all the way through that animal's life. And also, so you can manage the sales of that animal. So I created a whole list in Animal Path where you can manage, if I sell the animal at this time, I'll make this much money. If I sell it at this life stage, I'll make this much money, etc. It's a really useful tool that a lot of people are doing in spreadsheets. And so we have it all in one system.
I can talk about, what's the kind of where does the production path product come in? So the great thing is that it all runs together. It's literally 3 products all on one platform, and they're all completely integrated and built as if it's one, but we've separated them into 3 pieces. So production path takes over when essentially the animal is acquired and you're sending it for processing. So production path is designed for the management of the process of taking that animal, sending it through the harvest process, managing it as a carcass all the way through the sales process, if that's where it's going to be sold, or taking it to the next step and into processing, which means creation of box beef, or basically raw materials. And then you can also take it a step further and do the secondary fabrication, which is the creation of finished goods. And all the while, you're tracking all of the costs, all of the products as it becomes inventory, or then becomes raw materials that are used for secondary fabrication. So It's tracking of all of those transition points all the way through to the final sale to a customer. Protein Path is really designed for really the end of the process, where like a CPG company that has raw materials that they buy, like bones or trim or what have you, and they want to take that and they want to produce meat sticks or bone broth or dog food or what have you. So it's really that tail end of the process, final fabrication, and then product sales. So, and that really can be used by those CPG types of companies that have that slight fabrication and then sales, or it really could be used by warehousing companies that really are buying finished goods and then just turning around and selling them and delivering them. So we really have 3 products, but it can be used by, I would say, probably 4 or 5 different models or deployment models that we can accommodate.
As a mom, traceability of food is a huge deal to me. It's not a huge deal to everybody, but it's becoming more and more of a big deal of where your food comes from, how it's processed, and what you're eating ate. So we want to provide a way for people to provide traceability to their customers. So HarvestPath is the path of the animal from birth to the plate. And trust and traceability is a huge deal for us. And that's basically why we started the company, the grass-fed beef company, in the beginning.
I think we also wanted to make sure the ranch had a way to stay. We wanted to, like Carrie said, make sure that we were providing really healthy beef. And I have to say, it's pulled the 3 of us really close. A lot of times I hear siblings don't get along, and you can maybe edit that out, but the 3 of us really do get along, and we really do have a lot of fun. And even though it's chaotic and it can be stressful, we still find ways to laugh. And I think that's one of the bright sides of all this is it's kept us cohesive as siblings and our family.
There's a big message in all of that, and that is that food is very important, and we as a society have gotten away from or distanced ourselves from how that all happens. And if we believe that people are feeling that having a better connection to their food is more important than it has ever been. And I think we had a question early on from a customer, a big healthcare customer, who served our food to their patients. And they called me one day and asked me if I could tell them what the stew meat that we had sold to them was made of. And I said, oh, give me 1 second. And in 2 minutes, I looked up the fabrication and I looked up the raw materials. And then I said, oh, well, we had some New Yorks and we had some other steaks in the freezer and we wanted to get rid of them. So we just processed them into diced beef. And that's why they were so good, because those were like New Yorks and some other stuff. And the buyer on the other side of the phone said, how did you do that? And they were kind of flabbergasted. And they said, the biggest distributors in the world that we work with can't answer that question. And sometimes they won't answer that question. And I think in the world today where trust in what people are being sold to eat is at an all-time low, having that kind of traceability is refreshing and it's important. And we believe that was important to us as a provider of meat products to our customers. And we found that many people or competitors of ours were interested in the same thing. And that's kind of when we realized that the product, the software that we created could not just benefit us, but everybody in the industry to do a better job of tracking, tracing, and showing that they're selling a high quality product that will, that will nourish people.
And what I would add to that, and it's yes and to all of that. Plus, my background, I did a lot of work for, corporate enterprise level software. Sometimes it was, less interesting. It was maybe more financial services or life sciences or something. And I think what is really interesting to me about all this is that it makes all of these, these business tools really accessible to, small and medium-sized ranches that wouldn't necessarily otherwise have access to something like this. So many people are working off of spreadsheets that, their one accountant built for them. And some of the ones we've seen have, a number of tabs that must be pushing the limit for what Excel can hold. And so, we're helping them get out of these spreadsheets that might be wrong, without ever raising an alarm. People are doing all this manual entry by hand. And so, being able to come in and, give them a real solution and not workarounds, is really cool. And the people that we talk with are the actual people running the business, so the people whose lives we're changing and making better are people like Carrie, people like Tom, who can then spend that, that time watching soccer or, not worrying about, supply and demand.
I think there's a lot that we can add to this too, which is it's hard work to raise an animal and then process it into a number of different products, and then to sell those individual products. And then it's so much work and so much data and so much information and transportation and all these different things. And I know that when we're on the phone demoing and showing people what we've built, the overwhelming response that we get from people is, wow, it's so nice that somebody who's in this business and knows this business has taken the time to build something like this. Because a lot of people will say to themselves, wow, God, we need something that does this and da 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 da. And we've come along with that, with the product that everybody, we think everybody's looking for, and people have said that to us. And I think when you hear that when you're demoing something that you've spent years developing, and people say something like that, it's so amazing. And it's not just amazing to hear their voices that they're like, wow, I can't believe you did this. But it's the other things that they say along with that, which is like, wow, God, this is going to make my life so much, easier. And like, this takes me so much time. And you can hear them calculating the hours that they spend doing these things, and that, we're hitting a button and it does it. And they're like, oh my God. So it's, I'm excited about, showing this to more people, because those early responses that we're getting back are fantastic, and they're inspiring, and it's kind of helping me, want to keep going, keep doing more.